Kadir Guler joins me now from here in Istanbul. He's a professor of civil engineering at Istanbul Technical University. Professor, I understand you were recently on the ground in the area where the earthquakes hit. What did you see in terms of damage to buildings? How extensive is it?
Yes, thank you. First of all, let me say something about that earthquake. Condolences to our country and nation. May God have mercy on the dead. I wish healing to the injured people. We visited Adıyaman district, Adıyaman city, and Çelikan. We have seen, especially in Adıyaman, central of the city, lots of buildings have heavily damaged. Some of them collapsed. Usually, collapsed buildings were about 10 number of stories in soft soil conditions. The important thing is, as far as I observed, that there was no sufficient shear walls on that collapsed buildings. Mostly they were constructed by using frame system. So the lateral rigidity of the buildings was insufficient. Another fact, there was some buildings collapsed having number of story 3 or 4. The reason, some irregularities. But at the same time, concrete quality, material quality, and reinforcement workmanship was poor, such as poor reinforcement details. So the energy dissipation capacity was very low. So there was no chance not to collapse during the devastating earthquakes, especially long duration, almost 2-second earthquakes.
I'm wondering, for the buildings that have not completely collapsed, how is the safety of a building assessed and determined after an earthquake such as this to ensure that it's safe for people to return, or if it's not safe, that it should be demolished?
Okay, let me, before answering your second question, we visited especially school buildings and hospital buildings, governmental offices. Their performance were satisfactory, but some of them moderately or heavily damaged. The reason they are constructed before 2000 year, such as the old version of the codes. But actually, in fact, in Turkey, we don't lack of regulations. Actually, we have project and construction control problems in Turkey. For buildings didn't collapse, actually, they should be assessed whether their damage level moderately or heavily. In the case of light damage, in that case, people can use their buildings. It means there is no structural system damages. In the case of moderately damaged, the buildings that didn't collapse, they shouldn't be used without retrofitting or strengthening of their structural systems. In the case of heavily damaged, but the building didn't collapse, in that case, it should be destroyed immediately. I guess it is the answer.
Okay, so when you talk about buildings that haven't collapsed and retrofitting them, ensuring that they're more safe in the event of another earthquake, what can be done in areas, for example, in Istanbul, which we know is also earthquake prone, to ensure that buildings are safer and can be better withstand an earthquake should one hit?
Actually, in Istanbul, we have a huge building stock, so they should be assessed, their earthquake risks, damage potentials, or earthquake resistance of that buildings. So it will take time. By the way, since last Kocaeli earthquake, 1999, there are some studies have been done in Istanbul, but we need more studies to check, to assess the existing buildings' earthquake performance. If they are not sufficient, we should reconstruct, or some of them, if the retrofitting is reasonable, reliable, in that case we should retrofit some buildings, especially to overcome total collapse and then to save human life.
Okay.
But if the probably new constructed buildings have sufficient earthquake resistance. The reason ready mix concrete used and high strength reinforcement, such as having ribs on the surface of that reinforcement. And another fact, in Turkey, or in the region, 10 provinces, there are lots of buildings collapsed. For construction of that site, for new buildings, we need to use special structural systems. As I mentioned, in the collapsed buildings, structural systems are not sufficient. We should use more shear walls. In that case, I can give an example. Turkey buildings, the Housing Development Administration of Republic of Turkey, they constructed more than 1 million housing units by using tunnel formwork system buildings. Their performance in the region was very good, no structural damage. So it would be better to use like that structural systems at site or some other parts of Turkey.
Okay, Professor. Professor, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off. We're just a bit short on time, but I do appreciate you joining us because you do have some very valuable information, and I know that the safety of buildings is something that a lot of people are very concerned about, particularly now, but we're going to leave it there. Professor Kadir Guler, he's a professor of civil engineering at Istanbul Technical University. Thank you.